Today, we're going over the ultimate mindset hack to crush your goals in 2025. A little hint, it's about going beyond the mind. We're going to start with a quote from Napoleon Hill, the book Outwitting the Devil, one of my favorites. If you have not read it, go check it out. The person who does not know precisely what he wants of life must accept whatever life has left over after those who use definiteness as a policy get through choosing. So it's a real quick, you can meditate on that, and it's about becoming more definite, creating more definition about what it is that you desire. Most people have not created enough definition, and things are vague and ambiguous. And we're going to talk about how to get more definite here. So why does it seem like some people get everything they want while most people struggle? I've witnessed people born in the hood rise to greatness, while others born with a silver spoon in their mouth wallow into drug addiction and despair. It's not about where you come from. It's about what it is that you can own. If you can own it, you have a chance to make a new choice. Now, I'm talking about what you can own in your life, not necessarily what goods and services you might be able to own. People go through this world believing that they're making choices. The reality, they're running programs from the past that keep the same stories on repeat. The scene and the names of the characters change, but the same suffering continues. Real choices are rare and typically brought about by scenarios outside of our perceived control. A traumatic event can snap someone out of their pattern program, creating an opening to choose something new. So things like death of a new parent, near-death experiences, losing a job. But what if you could create fertile ground for a new choice without waiting for some traumatic or dramatic event to force you out of the old patterns? What if you could do it consciously? And that's what we're talking about today. But before we do that, I'm going to have to get into a bit of a story. And it's about the path to mastery. We all crave it. If you're watching this video, you crave mastery in some way over our goals, our relationships, and our lives. But mastery isn't a straight line. It unfolds in a non-linear way, but we can also look at it in these three different stages anytime we're trying to master something. So stage one is methods. Stage two is principles. Stage three is your being. So look back on your life. Was there something you desired to master? I have a whole list of these things, but let's start with one I bet you've had too, which is fitness. We all want to be fit at some point. And so for me, it started with me walking down the aisle of a local grocery store in Memphis, Tennessee when I was 15 years old. And it was a magazine article. And I was an insecure teenager, which I think most teenagers are. And I was looking for a way to appeal to the ladies. The men featured on the covers had hot chicks leaning on them or gazing at them with adoration. And that's exactly what I wanted. If I could be like that, then I'd be happy. Easy. Buy the magazine, read the articles, do the workouts. The methods were clear. Workout routines and the proper combination of protein, carbs, and fats. I was obsessed over those methods, and it worked for a while. Especially helps when you're a teenager. But results eventually slowed, and I moved from obsessing over methods or over a single method to chasing the next best one, hoping to reignite the progress. I used different bodybuilders' routines, Arnold Schwarzenegger's chest workout, Dorian Yates' back routine, Frank's leg day. If you followed any of the bodybuilders in the past, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I was mixing and matching without understanding the underlying systems and principles. But in jumping from method to method bought me some time, and it did get me some results, but it's not something that really got me to where I wanted to be. Now, there's a little mindset pitfall that I want to outline here. And a lot of times when progress slows or stalls, we unconsciously engage the same type of behavior that generated success in the beginning. So rarely is this the solution, but it does satisfy the ego's search for safety. I see this a lot with entrepreneurs where a lot of times they'll just they had success in launching a program, and so anytime the business isn't growing, they go to launch another program instead of tweaking something else, because unconsciously they go, well, when I did this, I got the dopamine hit, I got the benefit, and it's usually just going to keep you in a repeated pattern, not going to get you there. And that just means that you're probably in that stage of methods, and a lot of times we have to repeat the pattern of doing a new method every once in a while before we realize that that's not actually what's going on. So now we move into stage 2, which is principles. In 2006, 9 years after picking up my first barbell, I encountered something that changed everything. That's right, it was 9 years later. The thing that changed everything was proper guidance. Enter Dr. Brian Schilling and the sport of weightlifting. Here I was introduced to the principles behind the methods. This is no longer about random routines from magazines. It is about understanding how human performance truly works. Principles allowed me to go deeper. For the next 2 years, I immersed myself in research and training with a team of dedicated individuals. I saw the matrix of training and began to understand the why behind the how. Now, that group of guys that I was training with was incredibly special. This was the Barbell Shrug crew. Chris Moore was in the room, Doug Larson, Dr. Andy Galpin, and a few other guys that were all dedicated to research. They were working on their master's degree, and the majority of my college education, the benefit of my college education was not necessarily what happened in the classroom. It happened because I was hanging out with people who were also interested in the same thing. So anytime you're looking at a formal education, I believe it has a lot more to do with who you're surrounding yourself with versus what classes you're taking. Not that those classes aren't helpful, but compared to the people I was hanging out with, the classes were just an afterthought. So we're going to move into stage 3, which is being. So fast forward another 9 years. See a little pattern here. 9 years, 9 years. I was conducting an interview at Aleco headquarters in Halmstad, Sweden, with Barbell Shrugged. The guest, I forget the guy's name, unfortunately, was talking about coaching, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't even know exactly what he was talking about. I don't recall that. I tried to go and find the show, and it somehow got buried on the Barbell Shrugged YouTube channel. I don't own that business anymore, so if something got moved around, I am unaware of it. But he could have been talking about some method or principle, but that's not what stood out. It was his presence. It was his way of being that stood out. And it might have been because the Swedes are so humble and they're unlikely to try to sell you on some method they made up. But it was obvious that he had all those principles. He had his methods and techniques at his fingertips, but he didn't flaunt it. And I remember that night as I lay down to sleep, my mind flipped through the catalog of coaches and athletes I had interviewed over the years. So up until this point, I had spent 3 years traveling the world, interviewing the top athletes, interviewing the top coaches. And that night, all the greats ran through my mind. And I realized that they were all following the same principles. Their methods looked different, but those methods were laid on top of those principles, and it's not really what set them apart. It was how they carried themselves. It was how they communicated. It was how they were being, and I had been soaking it up unconsciously. And in that moment, I realized how fortunate I was. I was spending hours or days with the greatest on the planet, and I was receiving transmissions that could only be received in person, and things that happened outside of the interviews and conversations that were happening at meals. And so many people got a lot out of those podcasts that we were doing, but I got so much more out of that. So I encourage you, if you get a chance, go and be with people in person if you want to experience the biggest shifts. Now, my being shifted during this process of interviewing the guests. It leveled me up. It changed how I showed up. It changed how I thought, changed how I felt, and it changed how I communicated. This was mastery. 18 years after picking up that first magazine, the transmission reached a new level of understanding. The greatest coaches and leaders I've encountered shared this quality. They embody the mastery. It's not about what they know or do, it's how they are being. And that's really the fullest expression of mastery. So being is your superpower. So I tell this story because you're somewhere on that path to mastery on the thing that you're working on. So I've been through the path of mastery around fitness. I don't spend a lot of time studying that anymore, but there's other areas in which I'm studying that I have yet to become a master of. And so I'm working on this right now too. And when you go further down the path of mastery, the broader the application becomes. And this is why a lot of times older folks who have dedicated their lives to studying something become wise. They're able to apply things they learned, and something that seems unrelated to another field that seems unrelated, but they can apply it and they can move really fast. So remember, a method is narrow. It delivers a specific result in a small area of your life. Principles are broader. They can be applied to diverse scenarios, but being transforms everything. When you reach the depth of being in any category, you can cross over into others with speed and grace. You'll move faster, act with more confidence, and integrate lessons more deeply. That's that wisdom I was talking about. So do you need to go through methods and principles to get to being? I think so. I think we as humans, when we're young, we're naive, and we need to go through mastery of one thing in order to realize that, to get to that being piece, and then we can apply it to other areas. Now the talking about being may seem really vague. You're like, okay, he's talking about being. Well, I'm going to get into that. We're going to talk about the foundation of your being. At our core is pure consciousness. Yep, that's where we're going, guys. The seat of your awareness. You may have visited that place, as I have many times, but only if you have attained the ability to hold it and stabilize it. Now, if you can hold it and stabilize it forever, I would say that would be what enlightenment is. So when people talk about enlightenment, a lot of times I don't really buy their version of it, because I've read some authors who talk about stabilizing that non-duality, and they can hold it and it never goes away. That seems like enlightenment to me. If you haven't experienced non-dual states, then this may seem a little out there, or you may not know what I'm talking about. If you've had really deep psychedelic experiences, you may have touched it. So when you're enlightenment, you're free of the shackles of belief, identity, and duality. Explaining being free of the shackles of duality, again, confusing unless you've had some type of really deep breathwork session or psychedelic experience. Now, I'm not asking you to be that, right? You don't have to be that in order to shift your being. And I'm not claiming that I am that. Definitely not enlightened. And I don't really care to attain it. And because when I've read from the people who I believe are enlightened, it doesn't seem like it's that exciting. Because when you're enlightened, the drama really goes away. And humans tend to live for drama. We live for stories. And the stories will really drop their meaning in that case. And I like to keep my stories, at least the good ones. I get to trade out the ones that don't serve me for the ones that do serve me. So when consciousness enters the body, this is like when you're a child and when you're born, the layers of perspective begin to accumulate. So you come into the world of pure consciousness, and the layers of perspective begin to accumulate really quickly. Our being starts to shape to the nervous system, your organs, fascia, and everything else of the body. And those things that bring us distinction, that define the infinite. All right, we're getting back to definition. That was the first thing that we said in this video. We were talking about creating a definedness, I think is the way that it was said by Napoleon Hill. So that is to define, to take what is infinite and to shape it into something much more focused. And so, a really simple way to think about our perspective is a language, a way that we make sense of everything by dividing it up into categories. And in those categories, we create preferences and desires. And our body carries the story of our ancestors as well. As much as it, I remember thinking when I was learning about human development that it's like, oh, this when a child is born, they come in this pure body, and then things start coming in. But that's not really how it works. Your parents pass down their DNA to you, which is they inherited from their parents, and so on. So their being is being passed on to you. It's inherited. So your perspective, even if you were born and then your parents were to hand you off to somebody else, you're still carrying those stories unconsciously. So what choice do you have about your ancestry? Well, none now. About the experience you've accumulated up until now, there's nothing you can do about the experiences you've accumulated up until now. You cannot change the reality of the past, but you do have a choice about how you interpret it. And so this is where we get to tweak our perspective. You can choose now what will shape the experiences you have moving forward. So we can look back at how we interpreted something. We can actually interpret events in the past differently, and that will actually shape our future in a different way moving forward. So if we're speaking about reality, do you believe that your perception of the past or the present moment right now is in alignment with the truth? Or do you realize that you are filtering everything through your lens? Do you realize that you are filtering everything through your lens? This lens is shaping your being. This lens is shaping how you're being. Thoughts and feelings, they're dictating your behavior. So this brings us to our next point. I love asking people this question. I love asking people, what's your first language? I'll get into a deep conversation with somebody, and a lot of times I'll ask this question, and they're like, what's that have to do with what we're talking about? And so most people, if they're born in America, they'll say English, or I've had this conversation with people from other countries, and they might say Spanish or French or whatever it is. But none of those answers, it doesn't matter what language they say, none of the answers are actually true. Your first language is emotion. The etymology of emotion comes from the Latin word emovere, or emovere, which means to move out. This references, you may hear other people in personal development talk about emotere, and that's actually a tweaking of emovere to kind of try to make a point. But if we're going to be accurate here, we're talking about emovere, to move out. This references the energy in motion within us that seeks expression or resolution. To be useful for this conversation, think of emotion as energy in motion. It's never static. And so a lot of times you may hear me talk about emotion or energy. We can really make these interchangeable. There are some nuance there that is not useful for this conversation. But a lot of times if I'm talking about energy, I'm also talking about emotion. So this is the first layer of your being. This is your perspective. Your perspective was being shaped before you knew words. It was being shaped by what was happening in your emotional body right after you were born. And for the several years afterwards, you lived in emotion. You did not live in words. Right now, most people, I think almost everybody, is living mostly in their head, which means they're living mostly in words and images. They're not living in a truly felt experience. And so you experience and express and receive life through energy, through emotion. When you felt hungry and cried, you wanted food. You giggled as your father made funny faces at you. You also sensed when someone was angry, happy, sad, or anxious. You learned that some situations required specific energetic responses. It was like, oh, okay, this is the right way to have an energetic response. This is the wrong way. This is, if I have this energetic response, then this will lead to feeling safer. And so you also began adopting preferences for emotional stimulus. You can check in with yourself. There are definitely certain emotions, and it varies from person to person, that we are attracted to, and there are certain emotions that we try to deny. And it's just that the energy needs to go somewhere, and we have to learn how to direct it. And so we have these preferences, and that really starts to shape our personality before words. And if you have children, or you have nieces or nephews, you probably notice that these children start having quote unquote personalities before they have words. And a book I really like on this topic is The 5 Personality Patterns by Stephen Kessler. And he describes how unmet needs are what shape our personalities. So when we're a child, we need something. And when those needs aren't met, then our personalities start coming online. And so you can read that book to get deeper into it, but I'm going to read a little quote here. And those start creating specific energetic patterns. And these energetic patterns don't have to do with your words. It has to do with what's happening emotionally. The energy in the body is literally directed in a way that makes us feel safe. So a quote from The 5 Personality Patterns by Stephen Kessler. The stream of life, energy, and awareness habitually moves through the body, especially in times of distress. The flow of energy through the body can be shaped in an attempt to cope with the distress. The flow can habitually move away from others, move toward others, move in and down, move up and out, be constricted. These patterns of energy flow influence how a person perceives the world, and therefore what he experiences, thinks, and feels. Pretty deep stuff. So your emotional patterns are unique to you. Stephen Kessler has found 5 patterns, and there's a couple backups in there that he's come out with. But remember, these are also just generalizations. Reading his book is a great starting point, but if you choose to go deeper, you will discover the uniqueness of your own emotional body. So even though someone may have adopted certain energetic patterns and we can generalize them, they're still incredibly unique just to you. So this is really important to this conversation because mindset is built upon your emotional patterns. So the second language is the language of thought, and that's the language that's made up of words, not necessarily emotions. So is that voice in your head really yours? And I thought my thoughts were mine, but the truth is I'm a synthesizer, and you're a synthesizer too. We just took a bunch of other people's thoughts from all over time and space, and we have synthesized it, and then we think that they are theirs. I had someone ask me on Instagram the other day if I had made a post about something, and they said, did you come up with that all by yourself? I was like, I don't think I've ever come up with anything all by myself. No, I synthesized it. And so the voices that we synthesize, the thoughts that we synthesize the most are the voices of our fathers and our mothers. They ring through our minds constantly, consciously and unconsciously. So yes, there are thoughts running through your mind of which you are completely unaware. So if you're unconscious of a thought, that means they're running around. You're not even know that they're, but they're doing their thing. So meditation, journaling, coaching, body work, yoga, and plant medicines can expand your awareness of the unconscious. And it basically just brings the unconscious into your awareness. Now, I recommend if you're in practices of revealing the unconscious and bring it to your awareness, having someone who's done that before as a guide, super, super helpful. So as your energetic patterns were forming as a child, you were also learning new words. You associated those words with people, objects, and behaviors. They were also associated with feelings. So the words are being associated with feelings as we're developing. So your mom didn't sit down with you with a dictionary and teach you the meaning of each word in a systematic way. Like even if even if she tried, you're using words to define words, and you got to learn those in a certain order. Sesame Street tried, but you learn words in a different order than other people. Even me and my brother, who were raised by the same parents, and we were homeschooled, we learned words in a different order, and we tied different emotional patterns to those. And when you were, 40 years later, I'm 43, he's 40, you would sit down and talk to us, and you go, wow, these guys are similar in a lot of ways, but also very different, even though we were raised by the same parents in the same home and all that. So each word is held in a distinct emotional significance. So each word holds a different significant emotional significance per person. So you've probably had the experience, I know I have, of believing that we knew the meaning of a word or phrase, and then as time went on, we recognized that the way we understood it is actually different than the rest of society understands it. And it can be pretty embarrassing in the moment, but we've all had it. How many times have it, a really easy, basic version of this is when kids are learning the alphabet and they're learning it via a song or something like that. And then they get to LMNOP, and it's as if this thing, they actually haven't sectioned off what LMNOP are. LMNOP, QRS, and it runs together. And a lot of times it can take until someone's 7, 8, 9 years old before they go, oh, these are separate things, and that's just a song. But we do that with a lot of things. So you probably thought a word meant something, you were using it, and then it was something different. So all that to say is your mental landscape is unique, and it rests upon your emotional landscape, which is also unique. So that makes you quite a snowflake. Me too. You're special, but also remember everybody else is incredibly special too. So here's the thing is, even though everyone's special, the solutions to unwinding it are very much the same, because even though the expression is different, how it happened is very similar. So here's the problem though, is your uniqueness is inherent, not a result of conscious choice. So as much as I wish that I was unique because I chose consciously every point of the way on how I was going to be, it's just not how it is. So early childhood experiences and choices you made out of fear dictated your psycho-emotional makeup. I talk about psycho-emotional. When I say that, I'm talking about the psychology, the cognitive, the words and the emotions, how they're combined together. That's your psycho-emotional makeup. As you move through life, the language became more sophisticated. You figured out how to minimize the expression of your emotions. I know that is true. If you've read this far, you're likely high functioning, which means you're getting along in the world better than most, but it doesn't mean that you're fully optimized and aligned with your life's mission. The world is run by overripe children. The body has aged, the mind has developed strategies, but when overwhelm strikes, tunnel vision ensues and pattern responses take over. Have you seen grown men throw fits like a 4-year-old? I know I have. I've been that grown man. Has your partner abandoned logic to seek comfort from you or someone else? There have been women I've dated that have done this. I've either come to the rescue, and if I don't, she calls her girlfriend, who will validate her experience. It normalizes this chaos, and the soothing comes from the outside world. So we need soothing from the outside world. That is childlike behavior. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's good to recognize, that's a part of me that has yet to grow up yet. That's all it is. And you can tell it's a childlike part of yourself if you're unable to give it to yourself. If you are seeking something from the outside, another person to help stabilize you, then you haven't done that yet. And sometimes we need to project onto other people and receive that feedback as we develop. So it's not a bad thing that we're doing it. It's just something that we get to notice and improve. And I named the example not to pick on women, but because our society has named it or normalized it. You can just watch any TV show where there's any drama in a relationship, and the example is displayed over and over again. Is, you know, the guy's being an asshole, the woman is upset, she calls her girlfriend instead of getting a hold of herself. So that is the solution: is we get a hold of ourselves. You get to become the parent to yourself that you needed as a child. You will likely be the first person in your entire lineage to do this. Yes, we are living in a world of children that were raised by children who were raised by children. Practicing acceptance of everything and every feeling without judgment. Noticing the thoughts that arise with those feelings. Noticing your breath and the tension in your body throughout the day. Presence. It's a gift you give yourself. Being curious about each moment. Can you be tender with those parts of yourself in each moment? Like you would with a child. It can seem like a lot of work, and it is, but it is completely worth it. Each moment holds infinite possibilities. Each moment is life or death. To be unconscious in a moment is to choose a pattern of survival. To choose consciousness is to choose creation and life. Each moment is your eternity, your heaven or hell. I have much more to say about how to approach our conditioning, more than I can say in the context of this video, and I'll be building more on this in the future. So we're going to get into some things that are practical for you now, though. So there's 3 approaches that I've identified in creating the life that we desire. And the first approach is practicing presence. So practicing presence and consciousness in each moment of the day, making new choices, noticing what's happening for us, what's happening emotionally, what's happening with our thoughts, and then practicing our own authority. Now, the more you practice presence, this will weaken the pattern's grip on your subconscious and ultimately your behavior. The more I focus on the present, the easier it is to stay aware and to be conscious. And just like physical training, repetition is what works with remaining present. The second of the 3 approaches is reprogramming. So that is reprogramming the subconscious mind through the superconscious. And so the subconscious mind is really running the show. It's processing way more information than the conscious mind can. That's why we do and say things and we're like, whoa, once we become aware of it, we're like, what happened there? We've all had the experience of we're in a conversation and something comes out of our mouth that we almost instantly regret. Well, that was the subconscious that was running the show there. It's the subconscious that's driving the car. It's processing way more information than the conscious could. And so we can go back and we can reprogram that. And so the best way to reprogram that is to access states of pure consciousness that allow me to So I'll talk about the way I've done it. Is I've accessed states of pure consciousness that allow me to access my heart's true desires. So in my experience, this requires heavy intervention. A few examples is sitting with ayahuasca, doing a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. That's 10 days of silence, 10 hours a day of meditation in silence. I've done body electronics retreats, which are fantastic. Now, each one requires a large commitment of time and intensity to let go of our conditioning and experience our superconscious mind, pure consciousness, in order to create a new program where we're choosing from a place where we're elevated and completely aware of what's going on instead of being bombarded with what's going on around us. And then the third way is programming. So that's different from reprogramming. So I'll just talk about reprogramming. Now, programming is a little different. So programming is how most personal development programs work. And that is they're basically layering a program on top of the old program and basically hoping that other program will stay quiet. And programming is beneficial. It will improve things in a small way over time. So I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm actually about to give you a programming exercise in here. It's kind of like a combination of like in the middle between reprogramming and programming. But programming, um, so it, reprogramming is when you're programming the mind from the superconscious, and the superconscious is this really elevated state, and then programming the subconscious mind with the conscious mind. So even though this is the slowest, it still has the impact. Researchers estimate that the subconscious mind is 200,000 to 2 million times faster than the conscious mind at processing information. So this is the level at which most personal development programs are operating. This is why also you haven't. This is also why you haven't been reading typical advice from me very very much, and you probably won't see too much typical advice. This is about as common as this is going to get. So I use all three approaches. 1 and 2 complement each other, so practicing that presence and doing reprogramming, and they're used to make quantum leaps. All right, these are big jumps. These are the things we're really looking for. Number 3, the programming piece is for making improvements to your current life and perspective. So for you to completely jump out of your current perspective and reprogram, a lot of work. But on a daily basis, I do the small improvements from day to day. And so if you haven't experienced those quantum leaps with 1 and 2, this third one will seem really magical. Nonetheless, if you've had those experiences, this is a great way to stabilize what it is that you've gotten. But again, this is for stability in those cases. If you haven't experienced any of this, then this will seem really awesome, and because it is awesome. This is also something I can provide through the internet. The first two really difficult to provide through the internet, but I can teach you here. So first, we're going to clear the field for new growth. And so if you're creating goals and establishing new habits on the rocky soil of pattern beliefs, it's not the best way to move forward. So we need to create some fertile ground first. We need to break it up, till it up. We need to become aware of some of what's going on in the subconscious. We need to quiet down the mind a bit so that we can plant new seeds. And so here's how I clear my mental and emotional field each morning. I do it a bit differently, but I'm going to give you a version that is easy to follow. I'm also going to put this in the description on YouTube. You can also go to my blog at bledsoe.life, and you can read through this. I also have some links. They're going to teach you how to create the visualization I'm about to talk about. But what I do is, like, step 1 is an Anapana meditation. So it's 20 minutes. So I sit comfortably with a straight back, close my eyes, and focus on the natural flow of breath in and out of the nostrils, and I observe the breath without altering it. When the mind wanders, I gently bring it back. So what I'm doing with Anapana meditation is I'm just focusing my attention fully on the air going in and out of my nostrils. That's it. 20 minutes of focusing on that. That's going to focus. It's going to train you to focus the mind. Then I'm going to move into some breath work. I do 12 breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. So I'm relaxed on the out. I force the breath in, relax it out. And on the last inhale, I pause as long as feels comfortable. And then after I do that hold, I exhale and I normalize my breath. And then I repeat that a couple more times. I'll do 12 breaths in, out through the nose. And then I hold. So I do a few cycles of that. That's going to bring an even quieter place. So you're about 25 minutes into this practice. And then after the breath work, I play a pre-recorded visualization in my voice. With the field cleared, I can plant the seeds of my desires for the day. So you don't need to start with my full routine. Again, you can read the full routine at bledsoe.life. The links here in the video. If you're listening to the podcast, you can go find it. And I've got a link in there where you can create your own pre-recorded visualization. So you'll use ChatGPT or if you're using Grok or Gemini or any of these other AIs, you follow directions and it's going to give you a script that you can read. And when you read that script, you can record it and then you can do this exercise and then you can start basically embedding the visualization of what you truly desire in your life and how you want it to go. And you do that every morning. And so that's going to help you shift your being. This is the mindset hack that I want to share with you. I need to give you a lot of context here. So your being has created the results of your life up until this point. If you shift your being, the methods and principles that used to define you will no longer fit, or they'll just be applied differently. And so this is where the true transformation comes in. So just imagine, I'm going to imagine what the rest of this year could look like if you just did this every morning. If you didn't do the whole thing, maybe you just did 5 minutes, just if you did the visualization as you drove to work, whatever it is. If you just adopt one or two of these things and then you throw in the visualization on top, you're going to start behaving differently in your daily life, and then those changes are going to compound. And in a year from now, you're going to notice, wow, the way I was in 2025 and the results that I got in 2025 are dramatically different than what I got in 2024. And it's because I did this thing every day.